Well, good evening, peeps. Here we are back again, and the lighting does seem to be better with the chairs oriented this way. I don't appear to be peering out of some weird gloom. But anyway, I had the weekend off and then I fell asleep last night, and that's as far as I get. But here we go again. And I've been watching today a little, probably over the last few days, actually. There's been a lot of stuff around relationships going on, and relationships can be rather fraught things, generally speaking. There's no doubt about it. We do some of our best growth going into relationships and coming out of them, because that's when it's most chaotic and painful and debilitating, shall we say. We lose our minds at both ends of the spectrum. But if we're wise and sensible, we can use the relationship while we're in it to grow profoundly. Now, there are three stages in all relationships, okay? Before we look at, who are we having the relationship with, what is it designed to achieve, what are we trying to do? And the three stages are the honeymoon phase, which is when we fall in love and we only see that which is positive. In fact, what we're seeing there is the golden shadow. The things we're not allowed to have in ourselves that we see and admire in the person opposite. And that's beautiful. I want that. I love that. When in fact we couldn't see it in the other. Did it not already reside within ourselves? How else could we recognize it? But whatever happened to us in our story, our script growing up, we weren't allowed to have those things. So when we first meet someone and we're attracted to them, we see those things we're not allowed to be in the other, and we seek to meld with it to complete ourselves. And of course, the other person is doing pretty much the same thing. The second stage of relationship is, the honeymoon period lasts for a good 6 to 9 months. And it's very joyful. And all those pheromones and oxytocin and all those wonderful things that have us not see the negative bits, but only see the good bits, the golden shadow of which, as we've just discussed, and all that high tension hormones and things going on cloud our mind to any faults or problems, and we will only see the good, and we feel joyous, and we can't stop thinking about the other, and everything is clearer and brighter, and music sounds better, and everything is better. And this is a very clever way that nature has in the biological imperative, which is the procreation of the species, to cloud us to any potential problems, to get together, mate and breed. So this is going on for both parties when they get together, usually. And as I said, it lasts for about 6 to 9 months. And then all those fuzzy feelings start to dip away, and we begin to see other aspects of the other, either things that we didn't let ourselves see before, but mainly the projections of ourself onto the other. First, we project the golden shadow, and then we project all the negative shadow. We also do that a lot with creatures of the same sex, by the way, and in some ways, some of the deeper stuff goes there. But romantic relationships are filled with projection as well. And when the honeymoon period fades, we then enter what's known as the second stage of relationship, which is the power struggle. Now, the power struggle can last for 6 months or 60 years, but whenever a relationship breaks down, it is always in the power struggle. And this is where we vie for control, the psychological feeding, the need to dominate and control, all based on our own anxieties, of course. And as I said, at that stage, we're starting to see all the negative shadow, but it's all projected stuff. It's stuff we are yet to own and see within ourselves. And then the final, if you manage to survive through that, and there are ways of learning to navigate through that, because truthfully, guys, if you don't sort out what's going on, all relationships are the perfect relationship. Whoever you're with, whatever you're doing, it is the perfect relationship that you need right then to grow your soul, okay? Now, if you can navigate through that effectively and well and get past the projections and the shadow material, own yourself completely, allowing the other party to own themselves completely, then you can enter the third stage of relationship, which is true intimacy. And during that phase, you're walking together not because you're enmeshed and bound and codependent and in some kind of feeding projective frenzy with each other. You are walking together because you know yourself, and you're walking together because that's your choice, because you love this person. Now, the thing, and there are many, we'll talk about how to get to intimacy in a bit, but the thing is, if it breaks down during the power struggle, and you go away thinking it's all the other person's fault and bugger them and how terrible are they and all that kind of stuff, and yes, there are elements in that, depending what the story was about. When you get back into the next relationship, if you haven't done the work at the end of that particular relationship, you will recreate the same scenario. And it's why we often can find ourselves, or friends or family, ending up in the same pattern of relationship over and over again. Okay, so your whole persona in some ways is simply a collective shadow response to childhood trauma, to the wounds that happened to you as a child. Everything you do and everything you go about is kind of a collective response to that. And the way you think, the way you believe, the way you react to other people and other situations is all based on that trauma and your attempt to avoid it happening again, okay? So stage 1, honeymoon. Stage 2, power struggle. Stage 3, intimacy. Not many people get to intimacy, but it's well worth hanging in there and doing the work to get so. Because as I said, if it breaks down in the power struggle and you don't do the work leaving the relationship, and often people will bounce back into a relationship within 3 months, 6 months, a year, whatever. It's all too soon. You really do need to give yourself the space and the time at the end of any relationship, which has always been the perfect relationship for you at that time. There is no right one. They are all the right one to help you grow. But if you choose not to do the work at the end of the power struggle breakdown, then you will simply recreate it in the next one. Whereas if you elect to do the work together as a couple to grow yourselves, then you will both keep growing in evolution of yourself, okay? And yes, relationships and intimacy, Deanna, they're pretty cool things. Hi, Adair, good to see you. So often when we meet someone across the crowded room, you know, that feeling, and it's like, oh my God, that is so amazing, okay? We meet them to fulfill the Cinderella story or the Prince Charming story or whatever, okay? But when you meet that connection and it's wild and connected and deep, what's usually going on is that it's the wound within you meeting the wound within them. That's what chemical attraction is, by the way. This is where your system is saying, oh my God, there's someone with the same wound as me. We ought to get together so that we can figure that out. Now, you will have a lock and a key approach to it. So you might have both grown up with an absent father, but one will treat it passively and one will treat it aggressively, or you will have a different approach to it, but it's a lock and key affair. And in that relationship, you are recreating the wounds of your childhood in an effort to heal them. But if you don't do the work to heal them, you will simply recreate them that happened to you in childhood and hand it on to the next generation. And you do have a chance with the next generation with conscious parenting to heal the inner child within you that's trying to avoid all the conflict and disharmony in the actual relationship, the romantic relationship. And those relationships can be fraught too, because often in a relationship, if the parents are caught in the power struggle, then they will tend to not be communicating with each other effectively, and they'll start communicating with their children to meet the unmet needs of the romantic relationship. You know, the daughter will become the mother's confidant or things like that. And it's very unhealthy. Children aren't equipped to deal with those things, and they love both parents and they don't want to be bothered with any of it, to be quite honest. So the wound meets the wound in a lock and key approach, and the baby arrives and you hand it on, generation after generation. As as you're growing up, whatever story you're being given, and remember we've mentioned before, many stories, no matter where you're born, no matter what you're doing, you will have a story for your life, okay? And if you were born somewhere else with someone else, you'd still be the same person, but having a different story, basically. And this script, this story for life is laid down into you by the time you're about 4 years of age, as we mentioned again the other night. And you hear parents scripting their children all the time. She's clumsy. You're not an artist. You can't sing. You can't do math. And whenever you hear parents saying can't, or whenever you catch yourself saying I can't, you're repeating a script message you got in childhood. Stop saying that. You know, there are very few. I mean, I can't run a mile in under 4 minutes anymore, even if I ever could. I might have once, who knows. So there are some things I cannot do physically. But in terms of growth and evolution and moving forward, I'm limited by very little, in fact, except by my own preconceived beliefs. So you get this script message about what you're allowed to be, what you're not allowed to be, what kind of relationships you'll have, how successful you'll be at them, how many kids you'll have, what age you'll die. And it's all laid down in blood and stone, as I said the other night, by the time you're about 6, and then you simply act it out over and over and over again. And it's your job to pull yourself out of that and discover who you really are. Because when you take on that script, you believe that these things about you are true. And once you believe something is true about yourself and the world, then you will create your reality to fit the belief. It's much easier than doing that than actually changing inner beliefs. Changing inner beliefs takes a lot of work and a lot of dedication. I mean, you see it in a young girl who perhaps grew up with an alcoholic father, and you'd think as she reaches adolescence and he was violent and aggressive to mum and the children, what have you, and she thinks, well, that's it. I'm never doing that. And then when she leaves the home and moves on in her own life, quite regularly that child will end up with someone who's violent and alcoholic, because her inner belief is that men are violent alcoholics and it's easier to be with them than to challenge that inner belief. So when you believe something to be true, you will act it out accordingly. And often we don't know that we're believing things. We think it's real. We think what is, and we also think that everybody thinks like us, which is a great mistake, because everybody's literally living in their own universe. Nobody perceives the world like you. Nobody. Because they don't have your genetic code. They haven't had your past life experience. They haven't got whatever it is that makes you up from across the spectrum of reality. And they haven't had your experience growing up. And yet we blithely go into these relationships thinking, well, I think like this, so therefore they do. Okay? And this applies everywhere. You know, like a person growing up with an absent father will produce in their romantic relationships unavailable men or women, okay? Or if you've grown up with a cruel mother, then your spouse will have a tendency to be very cruel. Now, it doesn't matter whether it's the mother or the father who is the worst wound inflictor in your particular childhood. And it doesn't matter what gender you are. So you will attract the wound that caused you the most pain, whether you're a male or female child. So you could end up marrying your mother or your father, basically depending on who was the one that left the biggest battle scars inside you, okay? So a child raised by a narcissist will probably draw a narcissist into their lives, whether they're male or female, irrespective. You get the idea, basically. So it's interesting, that thing about the living in your own universe. When we are with someone, we don't actually see them. We really don't. As I said, there's the golden shadow first, then there's the projective negative shadow. We don't actually see the other person. It's very rare that humans see each other as they are. Very rare. What we see is our projection of the other. And this is why, where it comes back to what we were talking about the other night, it's really important not to take on board what the other person says about us, because they're not even seeing us. They're seeing their projection of us, and it's about them as they learn to discover and own the parts of themselves they still need to discover and own. And we should not take that on board. It doesn't mean we can't have a conversation about actual things that are going on, but do not personalize someone's interpretation of your reality, because it isn't about you. It's about the person doing the thinking and speaking, okay? And this is true of us as well. We rarely see the other person, we see our projection of them, okay? And we don't talk about this, we don't acknowledge it, we don't even know it. So we grow up in this world, often with parents who had the same thing done to them, ad nauseum, back through the lineage. And we come to experience within a very short time of arriving on the planet that love equals pain. Love is pain, okay? And so then when you start getting closer to someone in a new relationship or in a power struggling relationship, as you're developing deeper feelings and you're trying to work it out, and you're starting to love that person, then what can happen is, oh, here comes the love, here comes the pain. I might just push them away now. I might get rid of them before they get rid of me. I might hurt them before they hurt me. And this is often entirely unconscious, okay? You don't even know that you're doing it. The saboteur kicks in and says, this person's not safe, not because they're not safe, but because of your perception of the wounds rumbling to the surface within you that are now going to impact on the relationship, okay? So the power struggle then kicks in. And then at the end of the relationship, at any stage when that breaks down in that place, often then we go to war. And all the things that we've kind of sat on and bottled up when an effort to maintain the relationship, then all during the, they're telling me I'm going offline a bit, so I might just check and see what we're on. We're on live. It's doing that thing again, so I'm going to keep posting that we're still going, and it's still running. So we often then go to war. We're not going to war with them. We're going to war with what they represent to us, okay? And it's very confusing, and we're feeling very emotional, and we do terrible things. And we involve children in the warfare, and we try and get them to choose between us and to the other. And this is a terrible thing to do to children, by the way, terrible thing. And often when one party in a broken down relationship uses the children as a weapon against the other partner to try and own and control, and they're venting their spleen basically at the other partner that's now left, or that you've thrown out, or you've left, or whatever. But you're then using the children to poison them against that person. And what I have discovered over nearly 40 years of working with humans is that when you do that, when the child grows up and works it out, the person they resent is the one who did the poisoning. They will often re-establish connection with the person they were isolated from. And when they realize what was done to them, the game that was played with them, they get very, very angry about that. So it's not good to do it to them anyway, because they deserve better, but it can backfire terribly later on in life. But it also messes with their heads for their own future relationships. So it's not worth doing on any level. Try and be grown-ups when relationships break down. Try and stay as neutral as you can in the midst of it. And it's not always possible, because everyone's feeling pain then, particularly if you weren't the one that decided to end the relationship. If you're the one that didn't decide, then you'll be feeling a great deal more pain than the other person. And so the warfare can start. And depending on what wounds are going on in childhood, then it can get very bloody. And people can do terrible things. You know, they can do absolutely terrible things financially. They go around recruiting allies in all of your friendship circles and try and turn your friends against them. And there's this nonsense then of you have to choose between me or them. Well, actually, I've been both your friends for 20 years. Stop that. If you want me to choose, well, then you've chosen to not be my friend. I'm not going to make those choices, okay? So don't get in, try not to get caught in the blame game and the warfare when other people are splitting up. It's not useful for anyone. So whatever's going on in the painful stage of any stage of a relationship, it's not actually about the other person. It's not. It's actually all your stuff. Anything that you're thinking, feeling, saying and doing, as we've said, is your responsibility. And if you're feeling pain in the face of your perception of the other, it's an old thing trying to move and resolve. It's not about the other, okay? Try and talk to each other. So how do we grow better in a relationship, I guess, was the thing that has come up a few times for me around some peeps over the weekend and some clients and things. When you first get together, it can be very powerful to subsume yourself into the other, particularly if you've been an isolated kid or you haven't had a lot of friends or whatever. That person can very easily become your whole world. They become your best friend, they become your lover, they become your confidant, they become your mentor, guide, what have you. You put a lot of eggs in that basket. You're welcome, Tracy. And the thing is, when you're going into, and that's joyful, by the way, that's joyful, but what often when people get together is suddenly their friends stop seeing them. They disappear into this burrow of joy and disappear for a year or two. And then when things start getting a little messy, they want to come and try and reconnect with their friends. And that can be very difficult because they've all moved on into different lives. So it's really important when you're getting into a relationship to maintain your own individual and separate lives, okay? So he has his connection and circle and he needs to spend time with them, okay? He needs to go out and do his thing, hang out with his mates, go to the footy, go fishing, whatever it is. And she needs her separate individual connection and friends, and they need to go out or they need to hang out and have a card afternoon, whatever it is, it doesn't matter. Go on a workshop together, go and do a weekend workshop with your girlfriends. It doesn't matter what it is. You need to maintain your separate lives, and then you bring those separate lives back together and you share that process. You share the process, okay? If all of your everything becomes invested in one other person, then that's an unbearable burden for the other person. It is. There's no way they can meet all of your needs, and then you end up being resentful of them because they're not meeting all your needs, but it's not their job because you've got to meet your own anyway. And it's really important to talk to each other, find ways to navigate conflict. One of the most powerful things to do in relationship is learn to navigate conflict, okay? Men want to fix things, women want to be heard. So often when a woman who's been handling a couple of kids all day and the husband comes home and she's just venting her spleen about whatever, he immediately feels guilty that he should have done something or anticipated or whatever, and then tries to fix it. Nothing's broken, nothing needs fixing. No woman should be left alone with small children anyway. It's a ridiculous thing. You've got to try and recruit the village somehow in any way that you can do it. But in the meantime, it is important to talk to each other on a regular basis, you know, away from the children. That you pick a time once a week, a Sunday lunch, a Friday evening after a week's work, whatever it is, you pick a time when the kids have gone to bed where you sit down and you share a glass of wine or whatever you usually share, and you just talk to each other about the week. Something as simple as, you got 15 minutes, tell me what your things have been this week. And when the first person is speaking, the other person is just listening. They're not responding, they're just looking into the eyes and listening. And when that penny person has finished speaking their thoughts, and they might be complaining about the school, they might be saying, well, I didn't like the way you did this. Don't interrupt, just listen. And at the end of it, just say, thank you for sharing. That thing about me, I'm going to think about that, and I'll talk to you about that later. We'll come back to it. But that's all you're doing. You're acknowledging that the other person has spoken. Thank you for sharing, okay? And then you swap. And the other person speaks for 15 minutes about whatever's going on for them, about how the boss pissed them off at work, or how you're getting tired of the bitchy girlfriend, or whatever it is, okay? So you again simply vent your spleen, and the other person simply at the end of it says, thank you for that. anything about me, I'll get back to you about. And this matters because often when we're not very good at listening, people, really, are we? By the time someone is speaking to you, the person who is listening, by about the fourth word, they're already calculating some kind of answer and they don't hear the end of it. So this little tactic of you have 15 minutes to speak and I will listen and pay attention and not interrupt, and then you will speak for 15 minutes and I will not interrupt at all, then the other person feels heard. And then at the end of it, you're not saying, oh, well, have you tried this? Maybe you need to see a therapist. Maybe you need to talk to the boss. Not trying to fix it. Just say, thanks for sharing. Okay? And that allows the other person to be heard, validated. You don't have to bust your chops trying to fix something that isn't your job to fix anyway. And when both parties have felt heard like that, it brings you closer. Look at a child that's crying or distressed. All they need is to be heard. It's the same for all of us. One of the most frustrating things in life is when we're not feeling heard. So take time to listen to each other. And because we're not good at it, set up a time to do it and follow that prescribed manner every week and watch some of the things that unfold, okay? And you will find ways to navigate, and don't personalize what the other person is doing. What they're going through is them. There might be things in there that you can then compromise on, and all relationship is about compromise, okay? And you can agree to disagree about things. Who says you all have to think the bloody same about everything? It's bizarre. Different people in different universes, remember. You can agree to disagree. Just make sure you're owning your own shit along the way. Now, one of the most problematic things in relationships is the expectations we have of those relationships. And Cinderella does have a lot to answer for. In all of her 144 varieties they have discovered all over the ancient world. So we all have expectations about what a relationship is going to be like when we enter it. And they might be anything as fanciful as, this is my prince and I'm going to be swept off my feet and I'm going to be looked after in a manner that I'm going to thoroughly become accustomed to. You never tell the poor bastard any of that. This is your expectation. And he might be expecting, well, I'm going to have this wonderful woman and she's going to be the mother of my kids and I'm going to come home to a cooked meal every day and still hang out with my mates. But you never talk about that. And so you need to know what your own expectations are. I mean, it's pretty simple stuff. We plan for a holiday. We research, we look at different places we could go. We think about, would that be compatible for us, blah, blah, blah. We plan to buy a car. We plan to buy a house. But we kind of drift into a relationship. And before we know it, we can be married or permanently tied down in some way or other without ever having discussed, how do you feel about kids? What was discipline like for you as a child? What do you think about education? How important is it to you? What's your religion? How important is that to you? How would that impact on us? Okay? Discuss everything. The Cinderella factor, remember, okay? So we've got all of these unspoken expectations. And by the time we hit the power struggle side of things, what's happening is we're beginning to get a little frustrated with the other for them not meeting our unspoken expectations that quite possibly we're not even aware of ourselves. So you need to talk about this stuff at the beginning of a relationship. What do you like? What do you dislike? You know, the expectations we have are incredibly powerful and we really have to dig deep and find them. So have a list of things that matter to you and then sit down and discuss them with your partner. What does a work-life balance look like for you? What's important to you? Is it owning things or is it doing things, you know? So these are all things you have to consider in a relationship. Because if you don't do that and then they're not meeting your unmet needs, which you haven't bothered to tell them about anyway, because half the time you don't know yourself, then next thing you know, you're starting to resent the other person for not meeting them. So you're starting to get cranky with someone for not doing what you haven't asked them to do, and you're resenting the fact they're not doing it for you even though you didn't ask. You see how insane it can all get? And it can get pretty bloody insane with all this stuff. So it's so important to talk. It's so important to express yourself. It's so important to understand your own expectations. And when the wounds start coming to the surface, when you're feeling not heard, when you're feeling invisible, when you're feeling devalued, when you're feeling rejected, when you're feeling abandoned, this isn't about the person sitting in front of you. These are about the wounds that happened in your childhood. So instead of immediately blaming that person and going to town on them, stop. Own the feeling. In the face of what's going on between us now, I'm feeling really abandoned. I'm feeling like you don't care. I get this is my stuff. But while I'm feeling like this, it's difficult for me to communicate. So I'm going to have to do some work on this and figure out ways around it, okay? But we automatically go to blaming the other, and the struggle is on again, and the psychological feeding frenzy and the psychic feeding frenzy is on. So whenever you're in conflict, be it with a child, be it with a partner, be it over an unmet expectation, have a look at it, examine it. Why am I upset? What am I feeling? What do I think they did? And 9 out of 10 times when we're getting angry with someone, it's because they are not meeting a need in us that we're not bothering to meet for ourselves, and we're angry at them for not reading our mind and sorting it. Do you see how insane it can get? And we can't read other people's minds, darling, and if you can, there's medication for that, all right? We're not quite telepathic as a species yet. It's coming back, and you all know with people you're very close to, you can be quite telepathic. But generally speaking, no. Okay, and if you are reading people's minds or you think they should be reading yours, as I said, there's medication for that. Now, so we end up punishing people for not reading our minds when we haven't bothered to read our own minds and share what it is that we want. That's often what anger in relationship is about. Now, the other thing is romance is not a permanent state of affairs. Okay, it comes and goes. It drifts in and out. And it must be worked at, all right? You and your partner, if you're very lucky, will be together long after children, if there are children involved, have entered and left the relationship. And then suddenly you're left with this stranger that you didn't want to spend any time with, and you wonder why it all breaks down then when the kids have left home, okay? Or when someone retires and suddenly you're forced to spend more time with each other. Who is this strange person? So it's got to be worked at. And this is hard work with a young family. It really is. It can be very hard work when other people are involved. So, because you're tired and you're distracted, and this is equally true when both people are working and you're trying to save for a holiday or a house or something, you just are busy. You must take time out to pass time together, to create fun events together, to do things, to do something as simple as go to the beach with a bottle of wine, to go to a movie, to go surfing together. Anything in nature is always good kind of thing. But you've got to work at it. Do romantic things for the other, and do it from a place of self-love first and then love for the other as a reflection of that. Flowers are really cool things. Don't do it just to fill a gap, but I was thinking of you today and I decided to get you some flowers, be it for the man or the woman, or something special, or you've organised a special treat. Think about ways and communicate with each other. Every day, another simple trick is to simply give someone a compliment every day. No, not about their hair or that's a nice shirt you're wearing, but I really like the way you dealt with that today. I really like the way you listen to me when I'm talking about things that make me vulnerable. And when you're doing that every day, then you're actually training yourself to think about the other in a positive light. Because as we've talked about the other night, we are often preoccupied with what's not working. And if we think the other partner is letting us down because they're not meeting our unmet or unspoken or unthought about expectations, then that becomes our focus, and we then look for evidence. And when we talk and recruit allies in our friendship circles for more evidence that, yeah, he's an arsehole or she's a cow, whatever. But if you're actually thinking that I really like this person, I love this person because, and you're taking the time to express that every day, then your mind and heart are moving in that direction. Practice gratitude in your relationship. It's the perfect place to do it, okay? Look for it and practice it and express it. And be present to the relationship. Be present. When you're with someone, be with them. I mean, in this mad, insane world we live in now, where seriously, the number of times I kind of noticed in and around the weekend where groups of people sitting and everyone on their phone, everyone on that device. I'm guilty of it. I can be out and talking on the phone. I'm practicing not doing it. But, you know, running a business, do this and do that. You're always trying to keep up. We're under more and more stress all the time to meet larger needs. So be present. Turn your bloody phones off when you're with your loved one. Don't be both in bed together on your phones. Talk to each other. Get a good book on tantric sex. Practice new and innovative ways to connect and love each other. Okay? All of these things matter. Work at your relationship and always look to see the other person's point of view. There are no black or whites in life. Your blacks and whites came from your childhood. Your partner's blacks and white came from there. They're entirely different. They don't match. So, nor are they true. Everything in life is a shade of grey. And the more you try and get your head around that, the more peaceful you will become. Okay? Black and whites lead to opinionated people who are desperately asserting their opinion because if they can get you to believe it, then maybe it was right in the first place. Whereas if you're more peaceful on the inside, if your locus of control is on the inside, then you don't mind what someone else thinks about something else because it's just an opinion and you're happy with yours and you're happy to let them have theirs. So look to see what the other person is saying. Listen to it. You can agree to disagree at the end, you know. Be open. We tend to dwell in echo chambers more and more in this world. You see it very much on social media, of course, where right-wing nutbags get together and they all hunker around these pages and they're all bickering and nattering to each other. They don't actually hear the left-wing side of the vote. And the same is true for left-wing voters. They all tend to hang out together and the right-wing nutbags are just that. You can see which side of the fence I'm on. And but we tend not to actually communicate, and it's when we're communicating with each other that we actually break down the barriers and we can find the compromise, okay? And so distractions can be death to a relationship. Make a point of being there, okay? So own your own stuff. A relationship is really the best way to discover what makes you tick, to discover what pushes your buttons. But when those buttons go off, remember, it's not the person in front of you necessarily. There may be an issue you need to address there, but your emotional reaction to it is about you and it's from the past and that's what's wanting to heal. Deal with that. And then just even if you're doing something as simply as taking 2 minutes to go away and breathe it up and then coming back and talking about the issue. But if you're attempting to talk about an issue between you and it's loaded with emotions from your past childhood traumas, then that's not going anywhere, is it? So whenever you're in a relationship, be present to it. Remember, romance has to be worked at it. Work at the whole relationship. Work at seeing the other side. Be open. Don't be part of an echo chamber in your own mind. Do stuff together. Maintain a separate life. Bring it back together. Don't look to the other person to meet all of your needs. Talk to each other regularly, just speaking, not responding. Remember, nothing is broken, nothing needs to be fixed. Blokes are great fixers. So just instead of fixing, instead of looking for a solution, just say, gee, that's got to be tough. How are you getting through that? You've immediately heard the other person and they, oh, great, they've heard me. And then they can start thinking about their own strategies. But if you immediately say, oh, well, have you tried this or have you tried that? Then the other person feels devalued, put down, frustrated and unheard, okay? And remember, every relationship is the perfect relationship for you. You have brought that person in that moment in time to grow your own soul. And the best way to do that is when you pass the honeymoon phase. Remember, during all those golden shadow moments, remember, If you see it in the other, it's because it exists in you. Give yourself a pat on the back for that. But you will draw partners that meet and match the complexes within you from the same wound. So if you understand that going in, then it's a wonderful opportunity to grow and evolve, okay? And during the conflict stages, try not to take anything too seriously. It's just, people get tired, they get grumpy, they have moods. That's all perfectly normal, particularly when there's a young child involved, and particularly when it's the first year of your first baby, okay? The most challenging year of your life. So everybody just needs a lot of love and support during that time. Dads as well as mums, we so often forget the dad in this process. But on him, there's this huge burden of responsibility for suddenly providing for this extra person and mum while she's not at work. So be gentle with each other. Start by being gentle with yourself. Be kind to yourself. Think about what you want out of your relationship, the one you're currently in or the one you might be going into. Think about what it is that your expectations are and communicate them. Have conversations. If you're going to settle down with someone, discuss how they perceive the world and then look for ways that you can compromise together. In most relationships, women are conditioned early to make the most compromises, and then they can end up feeling very resentful. So ladies, you've got to stop doing that. And men, you've got to be prepared to be focused on what you can compromise as well. So I think that's about all I wanted to rabbit on about tonight. But yeah, they are fraught. Remember the 3 stages: honeymoon, power struggle, intimacy. There's a great book, which most of my clients will have come across, written by Harville Hendrix, the same guy that did with his partner Giving the Love That Heals. It's a book called Getting the Love You Want. It's a guide for couples, but even if you're not in a relationship, I strongly recommend you read it. It explains what you're doing together, what you're drawn together for, what the wounds are about, and how you each have this lock and key way of approaching it. But at the end of that book, there's a series of exercises to help you bust that wide open, that power struggle, and reach that stage of intimacy where you're owning your own stuff, you're lovingly reflecting that with the other person, you are walking together because that's what you want to be doing, and not because, as I said, there's this codependent enmeshment on each other's pain, okay? You create your own reality. So challenge your belief structures, challenge why you do the things you do, why you believe the things you believe. Be prepared to grow and evolve, because every relationship you're in will grow your soul if you let it. If you bust out during the power struggle, then all of that pain and anguish that comes after, take time before you get back into a relationship again. And I would recommend at least 18 months. Grief lasts 2 years, okay? Particularly if you're on the receiving end of the breakup and not the initiator. Process your grief. Deal with all your feelings around it. Get some help with that. There are a million paths, okay? And take time out. Grow yourself. Heal yourself. Because if you jump into another relationship on a rebound or too quickly and you haven't resolved that, you're going to take all that baggage with you and start it all over again. And we see people serially end up with the same kind of human going from one relationship to another as they work things out. So I think that's about all I want to say on relationships. It's just they've been perking around a bit at the moment. And if you saw the last moon blog post, you'll understand that everything at the moment, up until the new moon on the 31st, I think it is, and yes, I must get around and do another moon post, is all about relationships and money, okay? So be mindful of both those things at the moment. So thank you all very much for joining me. Great to see you all. Or you're seeing me, so you know what I mean. And tomorrow we'll have a blather about something else that may be of interest. And do feel free to throw other things in that you might want to talk about or hear about. And I wish you all the best in everything that you do, because you're all fantastic, divine, precious jewels of the universe. You wouldn't be here on this planet at this moment were that not so. Take care, loves. See you next time.